Thank you for listening to Offline and Unfiltered. We are your hosts, Lakisha and Megan.
On this podcast, we bring you unfiltered conversations on business and culture through listener stories, expert interviews, and a little bit of shit talking. Hello, dear listeners, and happy 2024. We're excited to spend some time today chatting about a very hot topic, which is the recent increases to minimum wage. Lakisha, are you looking forward to talking about this today?
I am excited to dig into minimum wage. I think it's really interesting. There's some facts around minimum wage that a lot of people are not clear about. And so, today there are two different standards when we talk about minimum wage. There's a federal level as well as a state level. And so that's important because each state costs more to live in. And so as of today, the federal minimum wage is a standard that is set by the FLSA. And for our listeners who are not familiar with that, that is our Fair Labor Standard Act. And so on a federal level, the current minimum wage is $7.25. And get this, Megan, it hasn't changed since 2009. Can you believe that?
Yeah. I remember making about that much in 2009. That's insane. I can't believe. Anyway, keep going.
Yeah. And so
insane.
What that federal minimum wage has done is it's really pointed back to the states to give them the autonomy to really define what's necessary for their state based on cost of living there. And so, federal minimum wage was introduced in 1938 at a rate of 25 cents per hour, which if you would look at that based on cost of living in 2022, 25 cents then would be equivalent to $5.19. So I think it's fair to say that we have come a long way with minimum wage. And so, as I mentioned before, states can have a different minimum wage standard. And so, Governor Gavin Newsom, under Assembly Bill 1228 in California, new fast food minimum wage will kick into effect April 6th of 2024. And so let's just dig into that and talk about that a little bit more. So in January, a minimum wage increase took place where we went to $16 for everyone. However, for fast food, they're going to $20 in April. And then there's also going to be an increase under that bill for healthcare workers as well. And there are some statutes and various standards based on what kind of facility you have on what that increase could be. So I'm just curious, when we think about that, $20 an hour, what is that going to do to us as the consumer, right? And also, what is it going to do for the employees who are now getting $20 an hour, which nowadays that's still not enough to live off of?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting, especially, myself. I worked my entire career in food service until I made a pivot like in my mid-20s into more like a corporate sector. But the hustle's real. Food service is hard. It really is. It's draining. It's demeaning, especially nowadays with like post-COVID. And I worked in coffee shops and movie theaters. Those were kind of the two spaces that I occupied. But I just have to say I'm really happy I got out of coffee before mobile phone ordering because that looks like actual hell. But it's tough to be in those jobs and I still remember getting payday loans to pay my rent, like to constantly feel like you're never going to catch up. You're always just going to make just enough money to survive. And I feel like the tides over time have been trying to make life better for people in these sorts of positions, right? Like we considered them quote unquote essential workers during COVID. And I think there's a common narrative that folks who work in fast food or restaurants or what have you are college kids looking to make an extra buck or what have you, but it's not. It's regular people who want to work full time, who want to have a stable income, who don't have many other options, maybe because of XYZ reasons. And these are services we all consume as consumers. And I genuinely, in my heart of hearts, think that those jobs, those people should make enough money to survive. We talked a lot recently about tipping culture, which is going to be an episode like later on down the line. We're going to talk about tipping culture in America. But, praying that every customer comes in and hits that $1, $2, $3 button because that's how you pay your gas. It's how you pay your groceries, things like that. So I know me personally, I'm pro the raise in minimum wage. I do think the distinction between fast food and healthcare workers getting more money is really interesting. And it makes sense because those are unionized roles. And so the unions worked really hard with Governor Newsom to make this change. But I don't love to play devil's advocate on this one because I have my own personal feelings, but I do see how like smaller businesses, like smaller restaurants, things like that, like that jump is pretty hard, right? And could be pretty intense. You see like a lot of small restaurants and things like that, adding surcharges to their menus to try to make up for like healthcare and increases in pay. And now that's another thing you can't do in California anymore. There's like a transparent billing law that just passed. So it's a complex issue. Like I do think minimum wage is too low federally. I think it's still too low in many states. But I also wish that we were in a place where we didn't need it. I think I always reference there's this Chris Rock joke, I think it's from like the 90s or early thousands, but he says, if a company is paying you minimum wage, they're saying to you, if I could pay you less, I would. And I think that's really powerful. And I think that that's like part of this discussion is like the fact that we even need to have it. The fact that folks like this do have to really fight and advocate to make a living wage when we all go to Burger King, we all go to Dunkin' Donuts, we all take part, we go to the drive-thrus. It's part of all of our lives. And I just feel like we should give those workers the same level of respect as the folks at FedEx or the folks in the office or the folks that run the app that you love. That work, even though it's different, it's not less valuable.
I think you bring up some great points, and I think there's one thing I would love to clarify for our listeners. Under Assembly Bill 1228, the fast food workers who are getting this $20 an hour increase beginning in April must be employed with the chain that has 60 or more locations. So I do think that will help out our small businesses because generally they're not chains, right? And they don't have 60 or more locations. The second thing I want to lean into a little bit more is I heard you say a minimum wage they can live off of. But if we talk about $20 an hour, you cannot live off of that. And so, I do think there's lifestyle differences, of course, right? Someone making $20 an hour isn't going to Whole Foods every week. But if we're just realistic with, the inflation increase, right? So according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, over the year end in June 2023, the consumer price increased roughly 3%. And then after that, it increased 4% over the year ending in May of 2023. And so that's a total of 7%, right? And so if we talk about kind of really the math on that, the increase that they will receive going to $16 in January is only $4 more in April. And that's an annual difference of $8,320 if you're full-time. So, if we talk about the average rent in California, $20 an hour cannot.
Do we have to?
Yeah, I do think we have to, because when we think of $20 an hour, you can't survive on your own.
Yeah, it's so true. Especially where we live, it's not uncommon for folks of all ages to be living in group houses. Like I, I'm fortunate enough to have a partner that splits rent with me. I couldn't live on my own where we live. And, I am certainly not making $20 an hour. I honestly don't know how people do it. It was hard for me when I first moved to California. I moved to California actually back in 2009. That's why I remember making about $7 to $8 an hour because I was a barista. And even that, I lived in a group house with several people, lots of turnover, lots of stress, lots of really dirty dishes. But I remember back then I moved into a room that was about $700 a month. And that was just a room in a house. And nowadays, no perfect math here, but I think on average, most folks in California, like you can't get a room in a house for less than like $1,500 now.
Yeah.
If not 2,000. And like, if you want your own space, forget about it. Like in some parts of California, like where we live, a 1-bedroom can be anywhere from like $2,500 to $3,000.
Yeah.
It's madness.
And, even looking at Zillow, right, what they're reporting is the average rental cost in California is $2,750. So if we simply do the math on just getting a roof over your head, right? We're not talking about the gas, the electricity, the groceries. You're going to struggle doing that because $20 an hour is $3,200 a month before taxes. So the math is not mathing. And so what I think I really want to submit for everyone's consideration is, where do we go from here? How do people have equitable lives? How are people able to show up at work and serve their consumer if they can't even have a stable home?
Yeah, it's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Like the first thing you need is housing before you can even begin to like think about living any kind of stable life. And, even as I was more like management positions in the food service space, like I had employees that were late to their shifts because the buses don't run consistently and they couldn't afford a car, or they had a car that was always in the shop, or they were couch surfing. Like I have had employees that just didn't have homes and they would just crash with whoever would let them stay. And, good people who are working hard, who maybe they're in school, maybe they're not. Maybe they took care of a sick family member. They had to drop out of school. Maybe they couldn't afford college. Like, I think those are the narratives that are always really frustrating for me, where folks see like food service and things like that as like this like lower class work or things like that. But again, it's services we all use. We literally called it essential workers during COVID. Like, if all takeout chains closed tomorrow, like that wouldn't, like everything would implode, right? It's like a really key part of our economy at this point. And, we're seeing things like, I actually saw an article that was really interesting. We'll link it in the comments, but a slightly different industry, but grocery stores, a lot of grocery stores are putting self-checkout lanes in. And as an introvert, thank you. Sometimes I don't want to talk to people, and I'm sorry, grocery store workers. Sometimes I just want to like get my bananas and go. But at the same time, like if I have a full cart, like, yes, I would like to be checked out by a human and have a nice conversation. But, a lot of companies invested in these machines because they're like, we're going to cut down on labor. This is going to be a huge cost savings. Minimum wage is going up, all those sorts of narratives. But now that these self-checkout chains have been, or lanes have been more consistent, they're who can get through those without something getting scammed wrong and the little red light goes off and then you feel like a failure because you can't even check out your fucking groceries on your own. So you got to call. So they need to be babysat by employees. They're seeing higher theft because it's very easy to just pretend you scanned the thing. Did I maybe say I only had one bag when I actually had two? Maybe, maybe not. And then, customers are frustrated with them. Like customers don't like using them, especially in regions where maybe the customer base like leans a little older. So a lot of these grocery chains are starting to take those out and replace them with people again. Because at the end of the day, can't do everything with a computer. And I think there are some fast food chains now experimenting with like trying to get rid of people altogether and making everything robots. And like, I'm sorry, like I'm not going to go there because like technology like that just breaks. Like we're not there yet. I don't know. But like we might be someday in the future. There could be a reality where these roles are completely replaced by robots, but I don't think that's anytime in the near future.
Yeah. It's interesting you bring that up because that's really in alignment with one of our major pizza competitors, Pizza Hut. So they have decided, hearing this news in California, that they are going to do a reduction in force. And so what their business strategy is that they will eliminate all of their delivery drivers. And you can use Grubhub or Uber Eats to have your pizza delivered. And so I'm just curious, hearing you talk about kind of folding in technology or AI into these industries. This may be a slow phased approach to that, right? We know that we're testing self-driving cars right now, right? So imagine if your pizza arrives in a self-driving car, right? And so I'm just curious, what are your thoughts about Pizza Hut? I think that's a drastic thing, right? To lay off. I think 841 drivers were listed in their WARN Act notification.
My thoughts are fuck Pizza Hut. No, but unreal. I saw that. Yeah, I saw that as well. And all right. So like the argument that there are other services out there and they don't necessarily need to employ their delivery drivers. Okay, fair. That's fine. You can use Uber Eats or DoorDash, even though those are complicated and for a lot of reasons as well. Maybe possibly another episode we can talk about some days like gig economy and the impacts on those employees or not employees, depending on who you're talking to. But I saw that article and like, of course they were crying. We can't afford this. We can't afford this. Right. So I was like, well, Pizza Hut's pizza is trash. So maybe like they're not doing well, So I decided to like Google it as I do. And Lakisha, do you know how much Pizza Hut brought in revenue last year?
Let me guess, around 11 to 12 million.
It was 6.8 billion last year. Billion with a B. With a B. Billion. So they can't afford to pay their delivery drivers a little bit more? Did their executives maybe cut their bonuses? Or maybe they just could give This is where like larger corporations like this really frustrate me because I feel like you could have a lot of money or all the money. And I feel like they always go the route of like, but we want all the money. So, all those folks in California, like they had jobs, they had lives that revolved around those jobs. It sucks to be a DoorDash driver and an Uber Eats driver. I know someone personally who does it, and people are terrible on that. Please tip your DoorDash driver, guys. This is like a PSA to everybody out there, because when the restaurant fucks up your order, it's not the DoorDash driver's fault. Anyway, soapbox ended. But you just put all these people out of work just because you don't want to pay them a little bit more. And maybe there could have been other strategies. Like maybe you just don't use as many delivery drivers or you limit your delivery hours or things like that. But like to lay them all off is just like fucking asinine. Like again, Pizza Hut pizza is trash. I am from the East Coast. I am very snobby about my pizza, but like now I really will never go there because like I can't imagine the room full of people that just like, oh, we'll just lay them all off.
Well, it's interesting because, I've been involved in several conversations, so have you, in regards to, businesses preparing to do a reduction in force and the justification and the financials around it. And so oftentimes the person who is being eliminated doesn't understand that there's a cost with that as well, because you're going to have to pay those 841 employee severance, right? And so just thinking about if we go back to the increase of $16 an hour to 20, right? Again, that's a difference of $8,320 annually. So let's say, which we know isn't true, but let's overestimate. Let's say the 841 delivery drivers were all full time. That's 6.9 million, right? That they would pay more, right, to those delivery drivers. So, could there have been an opportunity to do a trial run on increasing your delivery fee, right? So I think there's always avenues to keep the business, but, people have to make those decisions based on educated assumptions. And so this is disheartening to me because I think this was the easy route, right? I do believe following this, I think we'll start to see rates increasing in fast food. And I don't know because I'm not in the fast food circuit, but I think we will start to see that trend upwards, right? And that's what companies are going to do to offset or augment their bottom line with this increase. And so I'm curious on just watching the trends to see, what's McDonald's going to do, right? What's Burger King going to do? And all these major players who make a lot of money. I mean, In-N-Out is a great example of a employee facing organization that cares about their employees, because I can recall years ago, I was doing recruiting and we were looking for medical device production employees. And I remember driving by In-N-Out and they had a sign up $20 an hour. And this was years ago. And I had to go back to the med device company and say, hey, you're paying less than In-N-Out to manufacture medical device components that get implanted in someone. And that triggered a shift in their mind. And they actually increased the wage based on that. So I do think, do I believe fast food workers should make six figures? No, I don't think that's realistic, because we do have to look at compression in organizations when we make those big jumps. But I do think people are entitled to have a fair living wage. And I don't know how we get there. If rent is $2,750, what is considered fair?
I think another interesting thing too is a lot of this is going to be driven also by companies' ability to hire, right? So I know of a business in town that has had a lot of trouble hiring, but same thing, they don't offer that. At the end of the day, they don't offer that much money for this market, and it's going to be a forcing function for businesses. It's like if you want good talent that's going to stick around, because again, paying someone minimum wage, you're saying, if I could pay you less, I would. So how are other companies that want to be competitive going to respond to that? Like, is that going to result in fast food chains that are maybe a bit more employee friendly, employee centric? Maybe they offer $22 an hour. So like McDonald's wants to get in on Burger King staff, so they're going to offer 22 instead of. I worked for a competitive coffee chain that was literally across the street from another competitive coffee chain. And it was like a constant battle. It's like our starting salary would be $14 an hour. And then they'd say theirs was 15. And then we'd raise ours to 16. And then they'd do theirs to 17. And so I think in a way like that will hopefully raise that $20 an hour, like just naturally. Will every fast food, will big fast food chains do it? No, they're going to pay people minimum wage. But I think like smaller businesses that can maybe afford it, maybe smaller franchises are going to, really think it's like, well, God, we want to pay more than McDonald's, don't we? And kind of have those sorts of reflections. I think like you brought up In-N-Out. I had a similar situation with interns, for example, where I kind of had to say like, hey, y'all, they can make more money at Costco over the summer. because Costco is another one that at the time was offering like $19 or $20 an hour. And so, those are the types of conversations that I hope like naturally start to raise things. But I mean, I do agree. I think $20 in California still not enough. And again, that's only fast food and nursing. Well, what about retail? They're going to be at the 16. And I will say this, I will work a fryer or a coffee bar all day, but please don't ever put me in a room and tell me to fold a bunch of shirts. That's actually like my actual hell. Like, I never worked in retail for a reason. I can't even do my own laundry and fold my own clothes, let alone do it all day. So folks in retail, I see you. You are seen. I value you very much. And I hope that y'all are able to also kind of bring the same movement forward. But it could be a similar conversation where like retail's stores are like, we're losing people to fast food. We need to be competitive. We need to start raising our minimum offers.
Yeah. I think you bring up an interesting point. Shout out to my retail workers because that's where I started. I was at Champs. That was my first summer job, and I thought I was so cool. I would get my shoe discount. I would get all these shoes. I didn't even take home a check because as soon as I cashed it, I spent it. So shout out to the retail workers who have retail addictions. I know it's hard. But I think two things are going to happen. Industries will start to collapse, right? So, for example, we're already seeing that in retail, right? Malls are ghost towns. Stores are shutting down because they cannot keep up, with the online trends, right? And so they're going to say, is it worth paying my commercial brick and mortar plus whatever I have to pay in wages and taxes and insurance for employees versus going to e-commerce? Because that's where it's at. I think oftentimes when I go on the mall, I don't even want to be in there. They don't have what I want. There's no employees because no one wants to work there. And it's just a miserable experience for me. I would so rather...
It's so depressing.
Yeah, I prefer to just lay in bed and click, 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 and it shows up. And if it's not the right thing, it goes back. So I think we're going to start seeing market changes on how they interface with their customer to meet the new demands. And I think also too, you talked a little bit about competition, right? When you worked at that coffee shop. I think what will happen is organizations will start looking at the total rewards, right? We have a lot of organizations today. I was walking by Panda Express and it said like college, free college. So I think there are a lot of companies that say, maybe we're not going to pay you in this vein, but we're going to pay you in another way. Because let me tell you, someone offering me free college, I don't know, that may be a good deal.
Yeah. I'm like, maybe that Panda Express job, not that bad. I do always wonder, not that I doubt the like good-hearted nature of like those sorts of programs, but I'm always like, but what's the catch? It's like, do I have to work at Panda Express for the next 5 years? Or can I work there for 2? But yeah, I agree. I mean, Starbucks has kind of gotten themselves in trouble recently around how they're handling union activity, which I am in solidarity with baristas that want to unionize. That's just me. Because a lot of parts of that job suck. But I do think Starbucks has been a great example outside of that and like the sort of benefits they offer. Like they were one of the first large chains to offer gender affirming care. Yeah. They did the college program super early.
And they didn't have any strings attached. You just had to go to a specific university. So they were way ahead of the curve. But I do think this is going to force organizations to think differently, right? Because we went through COVID, which really showed like the gig economy, right? And it also showed people, be happy, don't be a slave. And so now what we're seeing in the recruitment talent pool is trash because good people are like, I'm not dealing with it. I don't have to work. I'm going to do something that glorifies me, that serves my soul, right? So you have that one component of the aftermath of a pandemic and the choices people are making because of what they've been through, their PTSD. And then you also have the other side, which is big business trying to survive, because at the end of the day, they do have a P&L to manage, and I don't want to lose sight of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I do have empathy for the folks kind of stuck in the middle, right? The big corporations, again, they can pay it. But, even $16 an hour for a mom and pop, especially where we live, like that's not insignificant, And I say this as, a small business owner myself and someone who has managed the P&L of a small business, especially brick and mortar, especially, man, you think our house rents are high, like retail is like a whole different ballgame, And so I do have some empathy there around that. But I will say, and there's some pushback here, I, as the consumer, like I personally am willing to pay more if I know the employees are treated well and that they make enough money to survive. Like that's actually important to me. It's not important to everybody. I will tip if I just get a coffee or all those things. Like again, because the hustle is real and I've been there. But I do have empathy for those smaller business owners, but I would be okay. Would I be okay with paying $13 for a McDonald's hamburger? No, because McDonald's makes all the money. Am I willing to pay $13 for like a really nice like craft burger at a small brewery or small restaurant? Like, yeah, absolutely. And when they have that little thing of like, our prices went up because we're offering our people healthcare, like, sure, that's fine. Because like I, as the consumer, care about that, and that's what it comes down to is consumer choice.
Well, the interesting thing, right, when you step back and think about it, you said, I am willing to pay for that. But I think that the and to that is I am willing to pay for that and I'm able to pay for that.
Also true.
If we look at, right, this population we're talking about, the fast food workers, the gig economy, they're working 2 jobs sometimes. They don't even have energy to cook themselves dinner. So they're the ones who are going to be impacted. So yes, they go up $20 an hour, but now their main food source has gone up. So again, how are they benefiting really, right? And we're blessed because we do have those choices. And, we were just talking about how I like the finer things in life. And so it's a blessing that we have the choice and opportunity to have consumer choice, right? And say, sure, we'll pay more. Sure, we'll tip. But what about the people who don't, right? Think about a family of 3, a mother and father and 3 children, and a Happy Meal goes up to, let's just say, $10. Well, I don't even know what it is right now.
I mean, I think it's like pretty expensive now. I think a Happy Meal is like crazy now. It's like $15
for a Happy Meal.
Like,
Jesus,
I'm pretty sure. Listeners, don't quote us on that.
What rock have I been under?
I haven't had a Happy Meal since I was a child, so I can't really comment. But I feel like I've seen posts on Reddit of people complaining about Happy Meal prices. But it is true. Yeah. I mean, like I had a lot of McDonald's growing up, single mom, 3 kids, like a lot of McDonald's, a lot of Burger King, a lot of Subway, because those were cheap ways to feed us when she had worked all day and she was tired and didn't want to cook.
So I think Happy Meals, just for our listeners, range anywhere from $4 to $7, depending on what you're getting.
Okay, I'm way off. That was the California price was creeping in.
I was like, inflation? I was like, damn, a Happy Meal is that much? What is a big kid's meal? So let's.
What can a banana even cost, Michael? Like $10? So y'all just saw my Lucille Bluth moment. That's embarrassing. We're leaving it in though, because it's funny.
It is funny, but so that's indicative too of us both being out of touch with reality, right? And so let's just say on that upper end goes to $12 for a Happy Meal. You have 3 kids. You're now looking at $36, right? Just on the children, not the parents. So I think we have to be thinking about that.
I think that's what's killing. Yeah. It's part of what's killing movie theaters for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Like think about how expensive it is to go see a movie. And for listeners who may not know this, movie theaters really don't make that much money off the tickets. They make all their money in concession. So that's why your concession combos just keep getting more expensive. The percentage of money that the theaters make off the tickets increases over time. So like the longer a movie is out, the more money they make on it. But if you think about how movies are structured now, they hit theaters and what they're in theaters like less than a month now before they're available on streaming. So that like longer term revenue for those like weird movies that stay popular for months and months and months and months, like that's gone now. And theaters like make all their money off concessions. So that's why it's so expensive.
So expensive. We went to see The Color Purple on Christmas, and
was it good?
Oh yeah, it was good. It's funny. I usually don't like musicals. I'm usually not that person, but this had a wonderful balance of musical and actually acting, so I could handle that. But I ordered 1 large and 1 medium popcorn, 3 ices. 1 was a medium, 2 were small. And guess how?
Hopefully blue ones, because that's the proper flavor.
Mix, not blue. Mix. And guess how much I paid?
All right, we'll allow it. Okay. Like, actually, this is like Price is Right status. I might actually be good at this one. So you said a medium and a large popcorn and 3 ices. Mm-hmm. How big were the ices?
The ices were 2 small and 1 medium.
I estimate you probably paid about $60.
Oh. No, it was 30. It was 39.
Oh man, I'm so out of touch. I'm out of it. I'm just like, I just assume everything's more money now because I've given up. Because I was like, all right, well, I think I'm just bad at math because I was like, all right, the 2 small ices, that was probably like $7 each. So it's like $14. And then like the medium was probably about 10. And then the popcorn, I was winging it after that.
Yeah, but I mean,
but still $40, that's a lot. Like that's a lot of money. Like I've been in spaces where I didn't have $40 in my bank account.
Right.
Like,
and again, think it's the holidays. So so it was me, my brother, his wife, and their children. And so we got that popcorn and we split it because we didn't need that much. And so, but just think about that, right? So I think when we talk about minimum wage, cost of living, impact, survival, I think it all plays into how people show up, and I try to remind myself of that when I'm in these difficult situations. I don't know what someone's going through, or what bill they can't pay or what burden is on their back. And I think that this is playing a key component into mental health, because what we know to be true is that the population has increased for transient in our homeless community, right? Because people can't afford rent.
Yeah. We bumped into a homeless gentleman when I was on the East Coast, and he had asked if we had any money to spare. And he was just like, nice guy. We were just chatting, and all I had was a 10. And I was like, here you go. Cause that's all I had. And he was nice. And I was like, and I had said to him, and I was like, cause he had a beer in his hand. And I was like, but you have to promise me you're going to buy food with it. And he was so stoked. And like, as he was walking away, he was like, hey, I think he called me like sweet angel or something like that. And he's like, this is for you. And he showed me, he dumped his beer out. He was like holding it upside down. And he's like, and now I'm going to go get some chicken. And he like went into a fried chicken place that was right there. And in my head, I was like, well, you didn't have to dump the beer.
Right,
I just didn't want you to go buy more.
Right.
But, and that's like one of those moments where it's like, yeah, $10 can actually like buy him a meal. Yeah. And he didn't have that prior. And yeah, it is sad. And that's why I do implore like anybody listening, like don't be an asshole to food service people. Mm-hmm. If they make a mistake, they're not robots. They're human beings. Do some people suck at their job at McDonald's? Sure. But they also like work at McDonald's and they get yelled at all day, and it's hot and it's sweaty and it's greasy. And it's like you said, like that person ringing you up at the counter, their mom could have died yesterday, or maybe they're working their 7th shift in a row because they don't have enough money to pay rent, so yes, it sucks when they put pickles on when you asked for no pickles or what have you, but like there's more to life. You
Yeah.
don't know what someone's going through on the other side. Just say, be nice about
Yeah.
it. Hey, I didn't want pickles. Can I have a new one? There's no, you see these videos that go viral, and this is why I don't exist on TikTok or any form of social media, because they just make me so angry. But you see people just like losing their minds and like drive-throughs and like at the counter and stuff. And I'm like, what the hell is wrong with you?
Yeah.
Leave these poor people alone. Don't eat out if you never want any mistakes to be made, because they're going to happen.
Well, you're keeping me honest here. I would say we're in 2024. I would say maybe 10 years ago, I was really ruthless. But now...
Oh, it's coming out.
Yeah, I was really ruthless because I would just get super frustrated because oftentimes I didn't check my food until I got home. And so I would then have to come back to the place, and it was just like so disruptive. And so I would say I've gotten better in how I show up. But oftentimes I will admit I do not deal with the employee. I just say, hey, can you get your manager for me? Because I think oftentimes what I experience, me personally, what I experience is I feel as if this person, it turns into this thing, right? Like, and I don't want to deal with this thing. Like, oh, it wasn't me. It's like, just fix it. Just fix it, And so dealing with managers, oftentimes it's, okay, let me get that out. They get it out quick.
Because they don't care.
Yeah. Yeah, they move through it quick.
They don't care because it happens all the time.
Yeah.
They're just like, yeah, here you go.
So that is something I had to learn, because I think oftentimes, let's say it's a minimum wage worker and it was their, something they saved up to go out, it could be frustrating, And so I think we have to just figure out how can we show up our best selves in situations. And so the trick for me is I don't interface with the server. I just, hey, can you get your manager for me? And then when the manager, I'm like...
And then they're shitting bricks because they're like, oh God, what did I do? But even still, like, I mean, unless the manager sucks, like, again, shit happens. I have this very distinct, actually a fun episode, maybe listeners for another time, let us know if you're interested in this, is like your customer horror stories from being in food service. I could write a book, but I remember very distinctly, there was a gentleman, he came in every day and he ordered the same thing every day. He would get an extra hot non-fat latte with no foam, and he'd come in every single day. And then like, one day I hit the wrong button. I hit large instead of medium. And he was like, and I told him it would be $3.25. And he's like, it's $3.10. It's always $3.10. Like, so pissed. And I just looked at him dead in the eyes and I was like, I'm sorry. I'm a human. And then he kind of like, it's like, oh, sorry. And I'm like, motherfucker, I will give you 15 cents. Can you calm down? Like, so those are just the moment. And like moments like that, every day, every day, there's always one where you're just like, come on. And like on a good day, there's only one. So I have a lot of empathy for people in that space. I try to be like extra nice. And even when like, even servers or shit, they're not nice to me back. I'm like, well, I get it.
Oh, no. So that's a different level. I am not there. No. You're going to need to show up and be nice to me, because
if I'm going to be nice to you, you better be nice to me back.
Well, not necessarily in every situation, but you're at work and your job says serve, right? It says serve. And so I think oftentimes people get confused of what it means to serve. And so, I do try to serve people in my day-to-day life based on my faith, because that's what Christians are called to do, serve people. And so that's like being humble and having some humility, right? And so don't show up to my table with attitude. That ain't gonna work for me. No. So maybe I'm not quite there yet.
My kindness comes from trauma. So this is probably our difference.
Yeah, that could be true.
It is true. But I think it's, again, kind of coming back to the minimum wage topic, is in a way you get what you pay for too, right? It's like,
Yeah, that's true.
I don't, one of the frustrating things of working at the coffee chain that shall not be named is they had like really strict SOPs, and there were things like greet every customer as they walk into the door. And then you'd get like some dick seeker shopper that would come when you're really busy and everybody's working, and then they ding you for not greeting every customer. And I'm like, we don't fucking pay them enough for that.
Right.
Like, we pay them enough to be pleasant enough to ring up the drink, to make the drink and not fuck it up, and then to send that person on their way, right? So I think that that's like, there's like an expectation balancing is, you know, I don't know, maybe everybody in fast food in California is going to be really nice for the next couple of weeks. They're like, well, I'm making $20 an hour.
Well, that's not going to happen until April, but
April. Everybody start going in April.
Yeah. So maybe the employees will be happy, but not the consumers, because they're going to be paying more. So I think the fair thing to say here is that there's an imbalance regardless. Like someone's going to walk away unhappy. And so I think, you know, the real, I guess, truth here is go after what you deserve. If you believe you deserve to be paid $20 an hour, great. If you know your work ethic, your strategy, your ability to have foresight, or, you know, to make the best damn coffee latte in the world, you know, be thinking about what skills have I learned here today that will be applicable in another environment where I can make more money. And so that's what I want to encourage everyone, because what I do believe, and you said this earlier, that everyone says, oh, fast food workers are college students. I think that was the idea and premise. But what have we done to take that generation and elevate them into their next stage of their career? And so I want to submit for all of our listeners, and it doesn't even have to be fast food. You could be, you know, a data entry person. You could be doing customer service. I mean, whatever that job is, if you believe, it could even be an executive job, and you know, you're not getting paid what you believe you're entitled to. Know your worth. Do not allow a state or a federal mandate to dictate how much you should bring home. And I think back to the Chris Rock quote, if they would pay you minimum wage, they would pay you less. And so you have to look in the mirror and say, do I value myself enough that I'm more than minimum wage? Even if it's a fast food place, pick In-N-Out, because they're paying more than that, right? So people are only going to pay you what you allow them to. If we had a big walkout at fast food and no one went to work, trust me, the pay would go up. Right. So I think we have to use our voice, and then we have to always be looking, you know, if we desire more and believe that living paycheck to paycheck, or, you know, you mentioned even payday loans, like living in that cycle, you have to say, I want something more.
Yeah. And I think it's important to hold companies accountable. Like I wouldn't eat Pizza Hut, but I won't now. I certainly won't now. Like, you know, I think that the service you receive is usually pretty reflective of the environment the employees are working in. So if you're going to like the local KFC and everybody's always miserable in there, it's probably not just the job. You know, It's probably the environment that they're put in. So like do your research, you know, like give a shit where your money goes. We shouldn't be giving companies all the money.
Yeah.
You know, if they're not good to their employees, then you should take that into consideration. And, you know, and Lakisha, just to double down on what you said, you know, to listeners that might be in those food service jobs, you know I've talked about my background in the past, but I didn't go to college. Well, barely went to college. You know, for me, it was hustle. It was just, I was a barista, but then I worked hard to become a manager. And then I went into a different industry, and then I worked hard there to be a manager. And then I tried to take those skills into another job. And then eventually I won't say it was the right place at the right time for me. I've found a way to get into an office manager job. And from an office manager job, I finally got into an HR job. So, You can, no job is permanent.
Mm-hmm.
No role is permanent. Make the best of where you are right now. Get all the skills you can. Every job you have is a step to a better job. I truly think that. I think that right now. And that's how I've lived my whole career. So it's hard. I'm not saying it's not hard to get out of food service, especially if you've been in food service for a really long time, or maybe you haven't had the opportunity to go to college or get specialized skills, but it is possible. It can be done. So, like you said, you have to figure out what you want and how you can kind of leverage every experience you have to take you to that next step.
And so when you talk about, maybe you didn't go to college, what I want to submit for everyone's consideration is that things are shifting in the job market. Those jobs that require degrees, employers are removing those minimal requirements because the talent pool, it's not lending itself to have those strict requirements that are really not even necessary, right? I remember many moons ago, you and I were working together, and there was a big company, customer service, and they wanted a bachelor's degree for $15 an hour. And so help me understand, why do you need to go to college for 4 years to answer a phone and talk to someone? So I do believe, like you said, companies, I think they do have some responsibility. And I think some of that responsibility is, how do they open the door for talented people and not have blinders on that talent only looks a certain way, or has certain credentials, or has been to the top whatever universities, because that's not true. And so I think that will be a piece of evolution through this process, right? That people are going to have to get a little more savvy on how they attract their talent at their, salary range.
Yeah. And I will plug myself, which I don't do very often, but if you're interested in my newsletter, it's called Human First Workplace. And I actually have an article on dropping bachelor's degree requirements from job postings and just my own journey on like trying to get into corporate America without a bachelor's degree. And the statistic I found, I might butcher it right now, we'll link it in the comments, but only 37% of Americans have a bachelor's degree. So that means like companies, you're limiting your talent pool by 63%. Just by that one line, just by that one requirement. Like really talented people, which, a lot of skills in food service, like, you know what people in food service are really good at handling? Customers and stress. And if you want someone who has good customer service skills and can handle stressful environments, then yeah, you want to hire that person who was a line cook at McDonald's, or you want to hire that person that was a barista at the busiest Starbucks in the middle of New York City, or what have you, or any sort of food service environment. I do think that those environments should be treated more like a training ground to elevate people into other roles in industries that might serve them better in the long term. But again, back to our original comment, I also think, again, fast food isn't going anywhere.
Yep.
And I do truly think that companies, especially these bigger companies, need to own that responsibility of that, like, these people need to be able to live their lives. They need to be able to have a house and a car and all of those other things. Like, I remember like digging through the tip jar saying, oh boy, I have enough quarters to do laundry. Like, and I was in my 20s, it's like I was an adult at that point. So I am here for the continual rise of minimum wage. I want it to be more.
Yeah.
I know that there are other people, and there are other people who have other opinions on this. There are a lot of people who don't agree with us, but they probably already stopped listening like 20 minutes ago, so it's fine. But
and I think, for all of our listeners, our intent is never for you to agree with us. It's for you to hear a different perspective. Because agreement doesn't serve the world when everyone's in agreement. I think our goal is really to broaden your perspective and just have thoughtful discussions, right? And drop little nuggets for you to think
Mm-hmm.
differently.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting to see how things continue to evolve. If any other states will follow California's lead, I think that that's something I'm watching. Looking at you, like Massachusetts. Massachusetts seems to be the other state that always kind of follows close behind. Um, I and I would love to see it expand to more industries. Like I feel bad for retail. I think it is. I think it does suck that there's this carve out. Well, it doesn't suck for the people in medical and also food service, but I do hope that this continues to be a trend. I'd love to be in a place where the state didn't have to dictate this, but it is our reality. And gosh, I really hope federal minimum wage gets looked at some point, because 720, I can't imagine you can live anywhere on 725. I really don't think so. Even in lower cost areas, I can imagine that's still hard.
Yeah. Well, I think people have made it work, and so I think you make it work wherever it is, whatever you're making, and there's concessions to your quality of life, right? But oftentimes, to push back on myself, maybe there's not a concession because that's the quality of life you've been accustomed to. So it's not, your vision is not distorted in a way that you believe you're missing something. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I can't even wrap my mind around 725. I got gas yesterday and 1 gallon of gas was $4.89. So I would have to, that doesn't even make sense to make $7.25 an hour. That's almost the price of gasoline.
Mm-hmm. Well, we'll see how things continue to evolve. It is true. Things just get more expensive, but we really need to make sure that the folks giving those things, I think someone I know said it really eloquently once. It's like a combo meal costs more than what the concessionist at the theater makes an hour. Think about that. The employees shouldn't be making less than what your meal costs. So I don't know. It's an interesting place. We'll see how things evolve. We definitely welcome our listeners. If you work in these spaces, if the $20 an hour, if that's something you feel like is going to impact you really positively and that you do feel like that's going to be enough for you, would love to hear it. Or if you have interesting stories you feel like are worth sharing from the front lines of fast food, retail, healthcare, et cetera, we'd love to hear it. As always, our email address is stories@offlineandunfiltered.com, and we'd love to hear from you. Lakisha, what do you think are some of our key takeaways from today?
I think our key takeaways of today is value yourself. Right. And our key takeaway is minimum fucking wage needs to increase.
Mm-hmm.
Federal and state, greater than 20. And third, I think it's really to use our voice in how we spend our dollar, right? I think you brought up some good points about that were really rich. And I think we lose sight of our ability to move the needle on things. And so I think that's what's important. I think those are some great takeaways for our listeners, regardless of what industry you're in, if you're making minimum wage or not.
And be nice to people in food service, please.
Even if they're not nice to you. That's what I learned tonight.
This was a great conversation, Lakisha, as always. Really interesting dialogue. And yeah, again, curious to our listeners, your thoughts on this topic. It's an interesting one. It's a complex one. And there's so much more to it that we didn't have time to dig into today. But again, if you have some stories you'd like to share, please send us an email, stories@offlineandunfiltered.com. We'd love to hear from you. And Lakisha, thank you again.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. The views expressed on this show are based on our personal opinions and should not be taken as legal advice. Contact an attorney for that.
Our theme music and sound was produced by Equilibrium. Our artwork and logo was created by Jillian Blanco. We are an independently run podcast. If you like our show, please rate and review wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to share your story or expertise, email us at stories@offlineandunfiltered.com. We can't wait to hear from you.